Hello everyone. This is Dr. Pritpal Singh, an MD in pharmacology from CMC Ludhiana. And today I'm going to start with a series of sessions on the UG curriculum based upon NMC guidelines. That's the competency number PH 1.13 and PH 1.14, whereas PH 1.13 suggests that you describe the mechanism of action, types, uh, doses, side effects, indications, and contraindications of adrenergic and anti-adrenergic drugs, whereas PH 1.14 describes the mechanism of action, types, doses, side effects, indications, and contraindications of adrenergic and uh, cholinergic and anticholinergic drug. So what we'll be doing is we'll be continuing these classes on all these sessions. So today and coming few classes we'll be focusing on the basic introduction of the autonomic nervous system, followed by the cholinergic system, and then we'll be talking about the anticholinergic system. So if there are any queries or questions that you have after while viewing this session, you could get back to me. You could write down on my chat box and I'll definitely get back to you. So we start with the basic introduction of the autonomic nervous system, and that is what I'm going to talk about as today, because autonomic nervous system as such, the this particular system, it started with the basic nomenclature of this particular system was that this particular system is independent of the nervous system, and the all the visceral functions are independently functioning without any control of the CNS. But as our understanding further developed and with more discoveries, what we found out was that the CNS is divided into peripheral nervous system. Now, this peripheral nervous system consists of two divisions. One is the sensory division, the other one is the motor division. The motor division is further categorized into the somatic nerve sensations and the ANS. So this is so as such now ANS, autonomic nervous system, is believed to be an integral part of the central nervous system, being controlled by the motor division of the peripheral nervous system. Now, when we talk about this autonomic nervous system, this autonomic nervous system is further subdivided into two categories. One is sympathetic nervous system, the other one is parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system basically means that this particular system is involved with fight or fright, and the parasympathetic nervous system is for rest and elimination. So when we look into this particular system, the central and peripheral nervous system, we shall find that the CNS consists of the two particular brain and spinal cord. Spinal cord further has peripheral nervous system, which brings out two nerves, the motor and sensory nerve, and these motor and sensory, the motor nerves further bring about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. I'll be talking about the detail of these sympathetic and parasympathetic in the coming slides. Now, the somatic nervous system is basically controlling the skeletal muscles, whereas the autonomic nervous system tends to calculate all other visceral organs. The functioning of all the other visceral organs is under the control of the autonomic nervous system. Now, what is the role of the autonomic nervous system? So, the autonomic nervous system tends to coordinate the cardiovascular, the respiratory, the digestive, the urinary, and the reproductive functions. So, all the visceral functions, whether we talk about cardiovascular, let it be respiratory system, digestive system, the urinary tract, or the reproductive tract, or combinedly genitourinary tract, are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. Now, what is so specific about the autonomic nervous system? The autonomic nervous system consists, as you can see out here, it consists from a component of the CNS, then we have an autonomic ganglion, and we have a target tissue. So, sensations from the CNS to the autonomic ganglion are transmitted via the preganglionic neurons, whereas sensations from the autonomic ganglion to the target tissues are conducted by the postganglionic neurons. How do we divide them into the cholinergic and anticholinergic system? This division into cholinergic and anticholinergic system is based upon the type of receptors present out here that are either cholinergic or adrenergic. Whereas if we talk about the somatic pathway or the somatic nervous system, we have a direct relay from a direct nerve sensation coming from that particular to the target tissue. Now let's talk about these particular. Now when we talked about in the previous slide, we showed you that there's a somatic efferent system which mainly consists of the skeletal muscles. You have a nerve that directly comes from the CNS and input from the CNS and acts on the receptors present out here, which are mainly acetylcholine receptors, and they are categorized under the nicotinic receptors. Quite simple. Then we go to the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system, for all practical purposes, the neurotransmitter present in the ganglion, whether we talk about this, or we talk about this, for all practical purposes, the neurotransmitter present in the ganglion is acetylcholine. And this is not the basis of division of sympathetic and parasympathetic or cholinergic and anticholinergic. The basis for the division is based upon the post-ganglionic receptor. So when we talk about the parasympathetic nervous system, it is the post-ganglionic neurons relay their transmission, the transmission, and the transmitter that is mainly involved out here is the acetylcholine receptors, which acts through the muscarinic receptor. Similarly, when we talk about the sympathetic system, it has three further subdivisions. In the blood vessels and various other viscera, it is noradrenaline or adrenaline. In the sweat glands, it is acetylcholine, whereas in the adrenal medulla, it is the acetylcholine. Now, when we talk about this sympathetic and parasympathetic, what you'll find is when I talk about the preganglionic, which is marked as red, and postganglionic, which is marked as blue, what you find? You find that in the sympathetic system, there is a ganglionic chain that is present out here, and the transmission of this ganglionic chain is from the thoraco to the lumbar area, whereas the ganglions, the nerve transmission is from the cranial nerves and from the sacrum. So this is known as thoracolumbar and this is known as craniosacral. Now, if you look at the preganglionic and postganglionic, what you find out? In the preganglionic neurons, what you find is these are short preganglionic neurons that are transmitted to the sympathetic ganglion, and from here we have the long postganglionic neurons that finally relay their transmission. Whereas when we talk about the neurotransmitter for the parasympathetic, you have a long preganglionic neuron. There is a ganglion present near the viscera, and we have a short postganglionic neuron that tends to transmit the transmission to that particular viscera. Now, both these systems, they work in equal and they work in opposite directions, though through a different set of receptors. Let's talk about this. Now, if we talk about the parasympathetic system, if we talk about its action in the eye, it causes miosis, whereas parasympathetic dilates the pupil. Similarly, if we talk about the parasympathetic division, it tends to increase the salivary flow, it tends to stimulate peristalsis and secretion, and tends to stimulate the release of bile. Whereas when we talk about the sympathetic flow, it tends to inhibit the flow of saliva, it tends to inhibit peristaltic secretions, and it also inhibits the bladder contractions. Similarly, it also causes conversion of glycogen to glucose, whereas this particular system, parasympathetic slows the heart rate, this particular component accelerates the heart rate. Similarly, in equal and opposite direction, in the bronchi, the parasympathetic causes bronchoconstriction, whereas in the sympathetic causes bronchodilation. So they are working in opposite direction to each other. Now let's talk about some basic differences. Now this particular system, I told you, it is thoracolumbar, and this is the craniosacral. The major neurotransmitter present out here is noradrenaline. That is why we have the adrenergic neurotransmitter. Now I'm talking about postganglionic neurotransmission, whereas for the salivary glands, it is acetylcholine. Similarly, for out here, it is acetylcholine. Then this particular sympathetic nervous system is for tackling stress and emergency, and whereas the parasympathetic is for assimilation of food and conversion of energy. So that is either fight or flight, or rest or repose, and both of these are working as antagonists to each other. Now, when we talk about the neurohumoral transmission, now this is the transmission of message across synapses and neuroeffector junction by release of humoral messengers. Now, how does this take place? It takes place via 5 steps. The first step is impulse conduction, followed by transmitter release, followed by transmitter action on the post-junctional membrane, followed by the post-junctional activity, and then ultimately causing termination of transmitter action. Now let's see out here. So when we talk about here, this is the pre-junctional neuron. Acetylcholine is formed. It is stored in the vesicles. There is a action potential generated out here, which causes release of calcium ions. There's calcium influx causing release of acetylcholine, which binds to the postsynaptic junction. Whether it could stimulate or whether it could lead to postsynaptic excitatory stimulation or postsynaptic inhibitory action, whatever it is. And then this acetylcholine is degraded by an enzyme that is there, that is acetylcholinesterase, which breaks acetylcholine into acetate and choline. Choline is further reuptaken in the presynaptic junction out here. It combines with acetate out in this particular presynaptic cell, leading to formation of acetylcholine, and this particular cycle is repeated again. So if we revise it, the steps that are here are: there is impulse conduction, there is transmitter release, there is transmitter action on the post-junctional membrane, there is a post-junctional activity which would be either excitatory or inhibitory, followed by termination of the transmitter action. So this is all for the session today, and in the next session, I would be talking about the cholinergic system, and that I will be further dividing it into 2 classes. So I hope you have had some clarity on the basic concept, and if there's any problem, do let me know. I'll get back to you. Have a happy learning and a great day. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.